Who has the right-of-way in every situation? Who moves first on the road? Part 1. Right-of-way is defined as a preference of one of two vehicles or vessels, or between a motor vehicle and a pedestrian, asserting the right of passage at the same place and time in the context of traffic rules, according to the Encyclopedia of American Law. Simply expressed, right-of-way laws are in effect whenever two or more cars, or vehicles and people, must cross a shared area. At intersections, crosswalks for pedestrians, railroad crossings, and whenever a driver wants to merge into a new lane of traffic, they will determine the order in which traffic flows. Many drivers have the misconception that right-of-way is automatic. In reality, you only ever have right-of-way if another road user grants it to you. The right-of-way must be granted. All drivers must be aware that even when they should have the right-of-way, the law does not always provide them that privilege. In any driving situation, another road user must give up or yield the right-of-way to you. Laws governing right-of-way merely specify when a car or a pedestrian must yield. A driver is breaking the law if they don't give you the right-of-way when they ought to. However, you also break the law if you compel a driver to cede the right-of-way because they disregarded the signal. When in doubt, yield. Every road user is required by law to take all reasonable steps to prevent collisions. You raise the chance of an accident by claiming right-of-way over another road user who hasn't given it to you voluntarily. Never choose the right-of-way if doing so puts you or another driver in danger. Regardless of who is in the right, you must yield whenever a driver insists on claiming the right-of-way. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, 3,659 fatal crashes in 2016 had failure to give right-of-way as a significant contributing cause. You will be held legally responsible if your failure to surrender the right-of-way results in a death, injury, or property damage. Even though the law mandates that the other driver had to cede the right-of-way, this is still true. When another motorist fails to yield as they should, it can be very frustrating. However, it's crucial to keep in mind that in these circumstances, you shouldn't retaliate or make an effort to correct the other driver. You are not responsible for upholding the law. The offending driver will eventually be discovered and cited for violating the right-of-way laws or may possibly face criminal prosecution. Have faith that justice will be served. Avoiding right-of-way. On all public roadways, right-of-way laws are in effect, however, they may not always be applicable on private land. However, this does not imply that you can disregard right-of-way laws by driving through or over private property. Don't go there. Sometimes irresponsible drivers will use this strategy in an attempt to appear intelligent. You would be violating a different set of laws by doing this, and you might even get arrested for trespassing. Special road users have the right-of-way. Right-of-way laws apply in all situations where two or more vehicles are attempting to cross the same section of the road at the same time. In some circumstances, specific right-of-way regulations for particular categories of road users may or may not be applicable. Generally speaking, these regulations serve to safeguard vulnerable or important road users, such as school buses, emergency vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. At intersections, the right-of-way. The most important thing to keep in mind is that right-of-way laws always apply to some extent. Additionally, even though a green traffic signal indicates that you should have the right-of-way, you still need to be ready to yield at an intersection. Unfortunately, people occasionally intentionally ignore or disregard traffic signals. To prevent an accident, you must yield to other vehicles whenever a red traffic signal indicates that they should do so. Roundabouts, right-of-way. Compared to ordinary intersections, roundabouts are a little different since all traffic is directed around a circular island in the same direction in order to reduce conflicts in the paths of travel. Roundabouts are extremely safe when right-of-way laws are followed. According to traffic regulations, vehicles already in a roundabout should have the right-of-way over those trying to enter it, therefore all motorists approaching the intersection are required to yield. Roundabouts allow pedestrians to cross the street exactly like any other intersection. Drivers approaching and exiting a roundabout must always give way to pedestrians using or attempting to use a crosswalk. Who has the right-of-way in every situation? Who moves first on the road? Part 2. The significance of giving way to pedestrians. At crosswalks and on the sidewalk, drivers must give way to pedestrians. In actuality, even if they are occupying an area you wish to drive on and the right-of-way should be yours, you should always yield to a pedestrian if it is practically possible. Pedestrians almost invariably get injuries or pass away in collisions with moving automobiles. Drivers must exercise caution and maintain vigilance when passing pedestrians. In right-of-way for pedestrians, you will discover how and when you must give way to the most vulnerable users of the highway transportation system. At pedestrian crosswalks, always yield. Drivers are required to yield to any pedestrian waiting to cross the road at the edge of a crosswalk, unless the crosswalk is illuminated by traffic lights. Even if the light is green, you must stop whenever a pedestrian is using the crossing and wait until they have fully exited the street before moving forward. A don't walk signal is in effect, however keep in mind that many people disregard the correct right-of-way laws and may dart into a crosswalk. When a pedestrian fails to yield, it is the driver's responsibility to do so. In much of the United States, the laws determining who has the right-of-way at pedestrian crosswalks are similar. All drivers must comprehend and abide by these traffic laws because pedestrian lives depend on it. Right-of-way on mountains and hills. All public roads, including isolated mountain roads, are subject to the same fundamental right-of-way legislation. However, confrontation between vehicles going in opposing directions is more possible than on other highways in mountainous places due to the steep hills and small lanes. There must be some additional right-of-way regulations as a result. The driver facing downhill is required to give way to the driver facing uphill whenever two vehicles going in opposing directions collide on a steep incline. Right-of-way on mountain roads examines the rationale behind this regulation and instructs you on how to safely yield when confronted by opposing traffic on a steep, congested road. School buses have the right-of-way. Strict right-of-way regulations protect school buses in almost every state in order to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. Drivers in both directions are required to yield whenever a school bus stops by the side of the road to pick up or drop off children by coming to a complete stop and maintaining a safe distance until the school bus has resumed its course. Each state has its own right-of-way law, with some minor variations in the finer points. You can find general information in this section, right-of-way for school buses, but you should also familiarize yourself with the law and your state's official driver's manual. Emergency vehicles have a right-of-way. Emergency vehicles are subject to a distinct set of right-of-way laws than ordinary road users when they have active flashing lights and or warning sirens. Drivers of emergency vehicles are required to follow all traffic laws when these warning elements are not engaged. Police cars, fire engines, ambulances, and other emergency vehicles may use flashing lights and sirens while they are reacting to an incident. The emergency response vehicle's driver ought to have priority over all other road users in this scenario. Always make space for moving emergency vehicles. Of course, when everyone on the road must yield at once, giving up the right-of-way is not always simple. When an emergency vehicle is approaching, you must know how to yield safely and effectively since other people's lives could be of danger. Crossing rights at railroad crossings. At every railroad grade crossing, drivers are required to yield the right-of-way to approaching trains. Since trains are physically unable to yield and have the ability to crush the average passenger vehicle like a car would a soda can, there can be no exceptions to this right-of-way law. Even if you believe you can get to the other side in time, you must yield to the incoming train and wait for it to pass. It's against the law and extremely risky to take the right-of-way away from a train. Every year, accidents involving negligent drivers near railroad crossings result in hundreds of fatalities. The sort of crossing you are dealing with, whether it is managed by active signals, and a number of other considerations will determine how and when you should surrender. Drivers must constantly perform a visual search for trains, even if warning devices show that none are approaching, so keep that in mind. Never take a chance when crossing a train.